Well, once again, good morning and welcome to Howards Creek Church. So glad to see each and every one of you here this morning. If you happen to be a guest with us, or maybe you haven't been here in quite some time, there's a little card in the back of the pew. If you'll grab that and you'll fill that out, you can give it to me at the close of the service. That way we can have a record of your visit, but also that way, in case there's any prayer items that are going on, anything that's taking place in your life that you need prayer about or you have concerns about, we will take that and we will begin praying over that particular situation. Begin lifting you and your family up in prayer. We also like, for the first-time guest, to be able to send out a note to them to say, hey, thank you for stopping by, just to show appreciation in that way as well. If you haven't been here for the last couple of weeks, we have been walking through the book of John and taking a look at the various I am statements of Christ. We're taking a look at a few of them as we are walking our way up to Easter. And this Sunday, we're going to be in John chapter 11 as we're looking at the next I am statement in our series. So far, we've examined the fact that Jesus is the bread of life that sustains us, that he is the good shepherd who cares for us. And this morning, we're going to be looking at the reality that he is the resurrection and the life, and in him that we are given hope for today. Now, before we get too far ahead of ourselves, I think it's important for us to set up the context of what's taking place here in John chapter 11 as far as Lazarus and Jesus and this particular interaction goes. See, Lazarus was a good friend of Jesus. Lazarus was also the brother of Mary and Martha, and Lazarus gets sick. Now, before you ladies begin to roll your eyes because you hear about a man getting sick, I know your first thought must be he probably has allergies. Maybe it's just a cold. I'm sure that he just has a little tummy issue. But now he's laying on the bed and he's moaning and groaning and on the couch and you think he's going to die. But in all reality, Lazarus was not doing well. He was really sick. It wasn't like this whiny man cold sick or anything along those lines. He was really and legitimately sick. Sick to the point that Lazarus' sisters, Mary and Martha, sent a messenger over to Jesus and they said, Jesus, your friend, your buddy, your pal, Lazarus, he's not doing well. He is very, very ill. The journey where Jesus was at, which was about 20 miles away from there, it would have taken about a day to travel. And so the messenger went there and he delivered that message. Jesus' words were somewhat perplexing, not only to the disciples as the events began to play themselves out, but I'm sure that they were perplexing to Mary and Martha, who would have received this message the next day. Jesus told them in the beginning part of John chapter 11, he said, this sickness will not end in death, but it is for the glory of God, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it. Now, can you imagine the messenger gets this message from Christ and he begins to take it back, and either that day or the next day that Lazarus passes away, and he's going to deliver this message to Mary and Martha. The confusion that would have ensued having heard from Jesus that this is a sickness that will not end in death, but it is for the glory of God. I can only imagine their confusion in that moment as they see Lazarus continuing to get worse and worse and worse, and as they experience that which many family members have experienced of watching their dear loved one pass from this life into the next to breathe their last breath and close their eyes and be at rest, and how painful that would have been, but also how confusing it would have been for them. Here, Jesus, who has done so many miracles, who has done such incredible things, has told them that this is a sickness that will not end in death, and so they're somewhat confused, I would imagine. Well, Jesus decides he decides to wait 2 days before he makes his way back to where Lazarus and Mary and Martha are at. And then he tells the disciples, listen, we're going to head that direction because Lazarus has fallen asleep. The disciples take that literally and they think, okay, great, he's fallen asleep. That must mean that he's going to be getting better. But that's not exactly what Jesus meant. So he had to lay it out for them. No, Lazarus has died. Now here, in this moment, the disciples begin to have all sorts of thoughts as well. They're questioning all sorts of things. They're beginning to ask these questions like, I can only imagine that the turmoil that is going on in their minds, that something that Jesus said was not going to happen has now happened, at least in the way that they were perceiving it. Lazarus is dead, but Jesus said that this sickness isn't a sickness that ends in death. So what is Jesus talking about? How did this happen? What does this mean about who Jesus is? Who is he really? Did we get it all wrong? Have we left our family? Have we left our friends? Have we left everything that we've ever known and we've followed after this guy and we've been through so much with him? And now, have we been trusting in the wrong man? Is he the real thing? Doubts and fears and worries and concerns in that moment flooded their mind. How do I know that? Because of Jesus' response to them immediately after that moment. He said, "For your sake, I am glad that I was not there, so that you may believe." So that you may believe. See, the doubts and the fears that they have, they became obvious to Jesus. While they may have been an internal conversation in their own minds, immediately Christ looked at them, he saw what was on their faces, and he responded to them with, "Listen, for your sake, I'm glad that I was not there, so that you may believe." Now their inner concerns were brought to the forefront, brought to the outward. I love Thomas's response. Thomas's attitude, because it sort of gives this sort of sarcastic sort of mentality here. Here's Thomas and them believing that by going back to where Mary and Martha and Lazarus were, they believed that the Jews would find them and that they would kill Jesus and that they would die with them. So Thomas responds in this way. With this sort of pessimistic courage, Thomas says, "Well, since Jesus is determined to go, let us go and we'll die with him." Just this sort of attitude and saying, whatever you say, I've given everything up. I'm going to continue following after you, even if it ends poorly for me. So that brings us up to where we are this morning. And the circumstances in this situation, they look pretty grim. They look pretty dark for all of the people that are involved. The only one that knows what's going to happen is Jesus and us, because we have the convenience of being able to look at things after the fact. But everyone else is perplexed at the turn of events of what has taken place. So at this time, will you please stand as we begin to read from God's holy, inspired, infallible, inerrant word this morning from John chapter 11, beginning in verse number 17. We'll go all the way down to verse number 27. John chapter 11, beginning in verse number 17. When Jesus arrived, he found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb 4 days. Bethany was near Jerusalem, less than 2 miles away. Many of the Jews had come to Martha and Mary to comfort them about their brother. As soon as Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went to meet him. But Mary remained seated in the house. Then Martha said to Jesus, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother wouldn't have died. Yet even now I know that whatever you ask from God, God will give you." "Your brother will rise again," Jesus told her. Martha said to him, "I know that he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day." Jesus said to her, "I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me, even if he dies, will live. Everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this?" "Yes, Lord," she told him. "I believe you are the Messiah, the Son of God who comes into the world." May God bless the reading of his word. You may be seated. Our overarching, our big idea for this morning is simple. It's simple. And this is the main point. This is the one point that I have to make this morning. It's this: we can trust Jesus in this present moment. We can trust Jesus in this present moment. Regardless of the circumstances, Jesus can be trusted in this present moment. Look here at Martha as she approaches Jesus in verse number 20. As soon as Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went to meet him, but Mary remained seated at the house. Then Martha said to Jesus, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. Yet even now I know that whatever you ask from God, God will give you." There's a bit of disappointment here in her tone. She understands that Jesus could have done something miraculous. She knows that Jesus could have healed Lazarus. He could have healed Lazarus where he was. He could have just spoken a word, and immediately Lazarus, 20 miles away, would have been healed. He would have been taken care of. He would have been restored. So there was a bit of disappointment in her tone, but at the same time, there's still that element of faith that's existing there for her. There's still that element saying, but even now I know that whatever you ask of God, He will give you. What's interesting to me is that the way that Martha says this, and what we see from the later context of what's going on here, this is a conversation that I believe had been going on for about 4 days. Maybe even longer than that. Maybe even when Lazarus first started showing signs and symptoms that something wasn't right. How do I know that? Well, look at verse number 32. Lord, this is Mary speaking, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. Almost the same exact thing was said by Martha. But then continue on to verse number 36. The Jews said, couldn't he who opened the blind man's eyes also have kept this man from dying? Here we have three different statements all circling around the same theme, that he could have done something. Everyone's focused upon the reality that Christ could have done something in the past, that he could have healed him, that he could have worked this situation out differently, how he could have just shown up a bit earlier and done something sooner, and then this wouldn't have been too late. It wouldn't have happened to Lazarus. In their minds, they now saw this situation as an impossible situation, and they had been talking about it for the past 4 days, and now they were saying to Jesus, and they were saying to the people around them, listen, you could have done something, but now this man is dead. The deed is done. It's finished. It's complete. There's nothing that can be done now, but we know that you could have done something. Even still, we have that element of faith in you. Listen to how Jesus responds to Martha's statement. Look there in verse number 23. Your brother will rise again. Your brother will rise again. He's speaking in the immediate. He's talking about your brother will rise again. He's seeking to give her comfort. Let me give you hope in the midst of this difficult struggle. Let me give you peace. Let me give you reassurance in this moment. But she doesn't understand what he's saying. She immediately interprets it in another way, because her mind jumps into the future. It doesn't look at the present. It looks to the future. Yes, one day things will be all right. Yes, Lord, I know that he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day. Yes, I know that all things will be worked out for good. I know that in the future, those things will be taken care of, that you're going to work in a miraculous way in the future. I understand that that is what's going to happen. But she's moved to the future. How often do we do this? How often do we do exactly what Mary and Martha and those people that were present watching all of this take place? How often do we do this? To where we see a bad situation coming up in our life, to where we see difficulties begin to arise, and then we go to the Lord in prayer and we say, God, I need you. I need you to fix this. I don't know why this is happening or what is going on or why this is taking place, but I need you to fix this. I need you to answer this prayer. I need you to work a miracle in this circumstance. I need you. But then the thing that we didn't want to happen ends up happening. Or maybe even the thing that we were praying that would happen ends up not happening. Maybe the car breaks down or another appliance breaks, or someone else gets the promotion instead of it being you. Or a significant illness is confirmed in your life or someone close to you's life. Or maybe even there is a loved one that walks out of this life and into the next one at a premature age. It is at this point in time that we say, God, you could have chosen to change this situation. You could have worked in this way. He could have healed him. He could have made this a simple fix. You could have shielded us or sheltered us from this expense. You could have made this illness go away, but you didn't. And so we look back on that area of our life or whatever it is that we've prayed about, and we say, God, you could have intervened and you could have worked this out, but you didn't. But I know that you could have. There's still that element of faith, but there's also that regret, that disappointment there. We focus on what could have been done. And then we do exactly what Mary and Martha did, and the fact that we immediately jump from the past and focusing on what Christ could have done or what God could have done in our lives, and we jump to the future. Yes, I understand that one day things will be better in the future. I understand that God is working all things out for His glory in my good for the future. I know that because this promotion didn't happen, God has something else planned. What is it? The saying that one door closes and a window opens, or another door opens. It's this mentality of, I know that He is doing something in the future. I don't know what it is, and I don't know why it is that this didn't work out, but I know that He has a plan for me. I know that He has something for me. I didn't get that scholarship, but I know that He is going to work this out in some way for my future. I don't know why this did not happen in the way that I desired it to, but He has a purpose behind it. It's an immediate mental run to the future. It's how we cope with the disappointment of the moment. But what's missing? What's missing? We've focused on the past and what you could have done, God, and then we immediately jump towards the future and that you're working something out in the future. You're doing this for a plan or a purpose that is later on down the road. What are we missing? We're missing today. We're missing the present. We're missing what's happening going on right now, this time. Are we trusting him in the present moments of our life? Having general faith about the past and the future is easier than a specific faith about the present in which we find ourselves. Look at what Jesus said in verse number 25. Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. That's not past tense. That's not future tense. It's present tense. I am the resurrection and the life. It's not back in the day. It's not in the future. It's now. I am the resurrection and the life. That's not I could have been or I will be. It's I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes, that also is a present word. That's a present tense. The one who believes in me, even if he dies, will live. Everyone who lives, that's present, and believes, that's present, in me will never die. Jesus is seeking to center everyone's attention on the present. God's power is available now. God's power is working now. It wasn't just something that was available in the past, and it's not something that's just merely available in the future, but it is here in the present, in the context and in the life in which we find ourselves. The same is true for us today. We have to move out of this mentality of God could have done something, but I know that God is working all things together for the future. He is. He absolutely is. But we need to grow into this mentality of God, you are working in the midst of this situation, and I'm trusting you. How are you moving in my life now? What are you doing? Jesus is seeking to accomplish something in us today. His power is available today. It's the reason why whenever we come to faith in Christ, to where we finally admit, listen, I can't find satisfaction on my own. I can't do it on my own. I need the help of someone else. I need a Savior to come in and save me. And we put our faith and our trust in Jesus Christ. It's the reason why the Holy Spirit comes to dwell within us, because we need His power in our lives today. Jesus wants Mary and Martha and the disciples and all of those that are present that are to stop living in the past and what could have happened and stop living in the future possibilities and start trusting Jesus in the present moments in their life. I'm putting my faith in you for today. Jesus is telling Martha that the resurrection power isn't some future hope, but it is a present reality. Jesus is saying that with me resides the power to raise the dead. Jesus is saying to Martha and to us that if we put our trust in Him, that if we put our faith in Him, even though we may physically die, we will live eternal life with Him. Those whose heart and soul trust and maintains in their faith in Jesus Christ today and every day will never experience death. This is what He's conveying to them. Meaning that we merely leave this earthly, the shell that we're in on this earth, and we join with Jesus in the air. Jesus has this emphasis on the present. Today, believe in me with your bodily action. Today, live with me in your heart and your soul, and have me as your central focus today. And then he asks the question, do you believe this? Do you believe this? We have to ask ourselves the same question. Do we believe that Jesus is our present hope, not our future hope? Not just our future hope, not just our past Redeemer, but He is our present hope in our time of need, in our time of difficulty. We have to ask this same question of ourselves. Do we believe this? Do we believe that Jesus is truly working in my today? Are we trusting Him for today's provisions? Do we believe that He is working through the situations that we're facing right now? Do we trust that no matter what happens, that He is doing something in and through our lives? This is hard. I know this is hard for me. This is hard for me because I find myself looking back at the past. I find myself looking back and saying, listen, I see how you could have worked, or I see how you almost worked, or I see how you did work, and then I have a tendency to immediately jump into the future and go, and I acknowledge that you have a plan for me in those things. And that I experience those things for a reason. And then we jump to the future and I say, I know you have a plan for me, my wife, and my children, and for our future. I know that you have a plan in those things. But then I look at the present mentality that I have. And how much doubt do I have in the circumstances that I'm facing in those moments? How much doubt do I convey whenever I'm in the secret, quiet moments to where I'm facing the trials of life and I'm seeking to figure those things out on my own? And I'm not running to Him. Instead, I'm trying to manage it all on my own abilities and my own control. I'm not looking to Him in those moments. How many times have I questioned God's plan? Am I always analyzing the events that come up and going, God, do you know what you're doing up there? Are you sure you know what's going on? Because I've got some chaos going down here. I mean, we could say that about the state of the United States. We could say that about the state of the world. Are you sure you know what you're doing up there? Because there's some chaos. How is it that you can be allowing these things to take place? Maybe there's some future point, there's some future means, there's some reason for it in the future. What if the reason is today? What if He's doing something in people's lives today, in the here and the now, in this present moment? Today I have power. Today I am the resurrection and life, is what Jesus is saying. Do you believe this? Do you trust that He is doing something in your life today? That He is working it all out in the situation that you're facing now? Do we press into the difficult moments of life to really understand why we've gone through the things that we've gone through? Are we clinging to Him in the midst of the struggle, or are we running around trying to figure it out? And then when the storm is over, we just go, well, I know you must have a purpose in all this. And then we kind of wander off in our own direction. Are we putting our present hope in Him regardless of the circumstances? General faith about the past and the future is easy. Let me say that again. General faith about the past and the future is easy. But what Jesus wants from us is specific faith for the present. Specific faith for today, when it all doesn't look like it's going to work out. When the doctor gives us the notice that it is bad news. When we get the bill that we did not expect. When we get the bad report from this particular circumstance that's going on in our life. When the boss gives us a bad review. When all of these things take place in our life, are we saying, I am trusting you in the midst of this moment. You are working even in this. And for today, and the next day, and the next day, I'm going to continue to put my faith in you. Charles Spurgeon uses the illustration in one of his sermons, and he talks about a poor, older French couple who had framed on their wall a note worth 1,000 francs. A traveler saw it, and looking at their surroundings and noticing that, listen, these people were not doing well. They were having struggles to make ends meet, to putting food on their table. He saw it and asked about it. And they said that they had taken in a dying French soldier, and he had given them that little picture when he was dying as a memorial of him. But they didn't realize that it was worth a small fortune if they would only take it to the bank. All of their needs would be met if they would only take it to the bank. Spurgeon applies this particular example by exclaiming, "Oh, that we had grace to turn to God's bullion of gospel into current coin that we may spend in life, and that we would use as our present spending money. Oh, that we might take the struggles that we're facing and the difficulties that we're going into, and we run to God with the gospel for today, and we say, I am putting my trust in your power today." We know in the story of Lazarus that inevitably He raised Lazarus from the dead in spite of what everybody thought was going to happen. All of a sudden, here comes this man that had been dead for 4 days. He walks out of the grave very much so alive. And God was glorified in that. And the Son of God was glorified in it too, because many, many people began to follow after Him at that point. The same is true for your life and my life as well. It's easier to believe that someday God will work out all of our trials together for good than it is to believe that He is presently working this trial for good, this difficulty for good. Jesus is telling us in a very simple, in a very short fashion, He is telling us through His word this morning that He is not only has the power to do great things with our future, but that He also is actively doing something great now. He's moving in your life now. You only have to take the time to say, I want to see it, and meditate and process on it and ask for Him to show you how He's working in your life now. The question is, do we believe that His power is moving in and through us? Let's go to the Lord in prayer. Heavenly Father, I want to thank You for the